Welcome to the Delight and the Limelight live stream show. Thanks for coming on to watch us live, or if you're watching the replay, thank you. I'm your host, Linda Ugolo, speaking confidence coach and author of the book, Delight in the Limelight. I'm here to help transform your experience of speaking from dread to loving it instead, whether that's on stage, on camera, in the media, or the meeting room. And today we're talking about elevating our speaking voices. And with me to share her expertise is Jennifer Hamady. Jennifer is a voice coach and therapist specializing in technical and emotional issues that get in the way of our self-expression. Her clients include Grammy and Country Music Award winners, contestants on The Voice and American Idol, and corporate clients in different industries. She began her career as a performer herself, singing and touring with artists like Stevie Wonder, Christina Aguilera, Patti LaBelle, Cirque du Soleil, and more. Jennifer's on the voice faculty of American University and author of several books on singing. Welcome, Jennifer.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here.
Oh, well, I feel honored to have you. You know, I'm enamored of your background, but what I'm even more enamored with is how you were able to discover this approach that really honors people's life experiences and how that interferes with their singing or speaking ability. And of course, that's my whole shtick as well. You know,
Right.
if you're not comfortable speaking somewhere, let's find out why.
Exactly.
And I feel like you have taken that exact approach with helping people in their singing.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, like you, I think that once we realize that we are not compartmentalized beings, we're holistic beings and everything affects everything, then we realize that just because we work with voice, we're really working with the whole instrument. And of course, the whole instrument is the entirety of who we as human beings are. So it's an entire landscape for sure.
Yeah. So I'd love to start off with, like, what are we trying to accomplish with our voices?
Mhm.
I know that people want to feel like, well, others want to listen to me when I speak. A lot
Right.
of people don't like the sound of their voice. They feel like it's too soft, too loud, too brash, too nasal, too gravelly, that it might shake when they're nervous and give their, undermines their confidence.
Yeah.
Uh, how would you describe what
Well,
we're after?
it's such a big question. And I mean, I feel like we could answer it so many ways. My take is, again, really holistic. I think when you ask, what do we want to accomplish with the voice? For me, we can look at it from what do we want to accomplish with the voice itself, meaning the sound, what we want to convey, how we want to impact people, how we want to make people feel. But for me as well, really thinking about the voice, I think about the voice as it's the wave upon which we ride into and through life. So for me, it is literally a metaphor for who we are as self expressed beings. So when I work with voices, with people and their voices, when I think of my own voice, I listen to it from a how am I doing today perspective. Not just vocally, how am I doing? It's allergy season here. Am I hydrated? Am I rested? But it tells me how I'm doing. Is my breath centered and grounded? That's a reflection of, am I okay? Am I mentally doing well? Do I feel open? Do I feel communicative? Do I feel connected and open to being connected? So for me, what do we want to accomplish with the voices? We want to offer the best of who we are and all of who we are in an authentic way. And we want to use it as a guidepost to show ourselves how we're doing. So there's a duality there. It's both. It's
I
it's everything.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said all of that. I agree. I remember some years ago, I was speaking with somebody. It was during the time that I was struggling with my singing voice. And I was speaking to someone who loves to sing. And she said, what I love most about it is that it allows me to connect with myself. And I went, connect with yourself, connect with yourself. What does that mean when it comes to singing? Of course, now
Yeah.
I am so intimately aware of how making sound
Mm.
is an act of vibrating our system. It's a way of noticing all the things that you talked about. You know, it's for ourselves, it's for others.
Yes.
And I love how you described that it's how we connect with ourselves first, basically. I'll kind of simplify it in my words. You
Mhm.
can add whatever you feel is missing, but you connect with yourself first
Mhm.
to to um so that you have the capability of bringing that out to then connect with other people. And when you do that, you're able to bring people deeper inside you because you are deeper inside you.
Yes, and deeper into themselves as well.
Yeah.
There's a
Yes, because of the mirror neurons. Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, there's a
Yeah.
reciprocity there. So the gift that we give ourselves by delving into ourselves and allowing the fullness of ourselves, we by extension give as a gift or an opportunity to those with whom we're communing and speaking and singing.
Yeah. Well, we're obviously getting onto a very kind of meta spiritual level here, but I feel like this is what is missing from the whole conversation of speaking
Mhm.
because it is magical. And I love you talk about in your book, the book The Art of Singing, you talk about approach with wonder.
Mm.
And I think that's missing. We've like as little kids learning to speak, we have that sense of wonder.
Yeah.
And it is amazing that we're able to, first of all, produce sounds. We're able to create different textures and sounds with our voices, with the, apparatus in all
Mhm.
the different languages, but that then we have meaning attached to it,
Oh, yeah.
and that we can convey meaning, and we can convey it with the tone. I
Mhm.
mean, there's just so much there that is wondrous,
Yeah.
and we totally skip over it.
Yeah.
As if it's like it's not present.
You know, it's interesting you bring that up. In my work, I work with singers and I also work with speakers. And that piece about wonder seems to come more naturally to singers because our cultural conversation around singing is wondrous, right?
Yeah,
Singing, ooh, singing special and all of that.
yeah.
And you're right, though, in the work with speakers, it's sort of something we take for granted, like we take our bodies for granted, right? Like I
Mhm.
get up, I walk to make a cup of coffee in the morning. We don't go, what a miracle that my legs are carrying me there. Right? And similarly, that we get up to speak or we work on a speech or we work with people on their voices. And it's just this thing that they really haven't thought about. And certainly is something that they don't bring this sense of awe and reverence and wonder to. So
Mhm.
that is part of the work, I think, is helping to, with humility, offer people the opportunity to see their voices and again, by extension, themselves as instruments with wonder. Look at this ability, I look at this life I have inside of me, and look at this ability I have to share and to offer. And of course, in our work, how do we use the voice in a way and play with the voice and affect people's emotions and responses based on little modulations and how we use our instruments.
Mhm.
So yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and it is really subtle, and it happens in different ways, and I know that there are ways that we are looking to expand into. There are also ways that we retreat from.
Mm-hmm.
So, for instance, I was just thinking this morning when I was working with Darcy Webb, who is another vocal coach, and she worked with Heroic Public Speaking, who I know you're working with now. And I was being told when I was in their program that I needed to project more. So I
Mm.
brought it to her class, and
Mhm.
she led me through all these exercises to, like, increase my volume, and then she said, "Okay, now run through your story," and it was loud, 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 and I turned to the other students, and I said, "But isn't that too loud?" And everyone was saying, "No, no, it was great." And one woman who was a former military person, she said, "This is a voice that I would pay attention to." And I said to myself suddenly, "This is a voice that I'd be afraid of." And it just totally opened my my recognition that to me, loud voices were scary and I
Yes.
was afraid of them. And I didn't want my people to feel that way around me.
Yes. Yeah. And now you're bringing in the psychological piece, which is such a passion of mine and such a cornerstone of the work I do. Because for those who, for example, play the piano or play tennis or golf, of course, their psychology affects them. It's going to have an impact on how they engage with their sport or instrument or passion. But singers and speakers, we're so unique in that we are the only ones where the instrument is literally in our bodies. Gymnasts, of course, too, dancers, but from the vocal perspective, the musical perspective, we house our instruments. So any thoughts that we have and beliefs, including those, to your point, that are historical and unconscious, these associations about volume and permission, they manifest physically, and it takes working with someone to even recognize that that was there in the first place.
Yeah.
How wonderful that you were able to see that and move yourself into volume and that expression in that way.
Yes. Well, I could do that in that instance, but I couldn't incorporate it until I did the work
Yeah,
of clearing the old stuff away.
absolutely. Yeah.
And you also speak about that in the book. You talk about that. Let me see. I think I took a note on it. That
Unlearning, maybe.
yes, it was something like your voice will never be clear and healthy as long as you have unmanaged fears standing in the way.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we are guided by our beliefs. And I know in the book too, and in my practice, I love this metaphor of you can't catch a beach ball if you're already holding one. You've got to let go. You've got to first assess and figure out what it is that you're holding and recognize its weight and its heft. It's not, beliefs aren't these little things that we carry around, these tiny little things. They can be enormous. So if you think about that beach ball metaphor, you have to let it go so that you can be open to something new, as you discovered with volume.
Yes, yes. So, what what is the way to a clear and healthy voice? Because a lot of people do struggle with tension, with inhibition.
Mhm. Mhm.
How do you work with that?
Well, speaking specifically now about voice, I know we're using this wonderful word voice in so many ways. I think when we want to think about it practically and physiologically, the most important thing in my experience is to look two things. Look at people's relationship with their breathing, which often when it comes to professional singers and speakers or those who want to be professional singers and speakers, the desire to engage in the activity gets their intellects going. And instead of allowing the breath, they start thinking and often overthinking about it. So, step one, sorry, that's quite a preamble, but step one is having people look at, get curious about, and understand how their bodies breathe naturally. Then we can work on assisting, supporting, and augmenting the breath. Most people don't think about their breathing, though. And of course, the breath is the vehicle on which the voice rides. So I think that that's really important. And then I think the second thing I would say is, of course, the voice itself. Not just in our speaking and in our interpersonal interactions do we hold tension, but we hold tension in our bodies. Many people are so tight, they're tense. Again, not realizing that the entirety of who we are instruments. We have to take a look at where am I holding tension and do the work, to use your word, of releasing that. Assessing and releasing the tension that we hold in our bodies, which helps to release the tension in the voice box. And also looking at the tension we hold when we're talking with other people. Because if we're hesitant, we're insecure, we're uncertain, we're not comfortable with vulnerability, then there's that tension too, which manifests physically. So breath, and then the physicalization of the voice and interpersonal dynamics.
Yeah, yeah. So I want to invite people who are listening to this right now to do a little body scan and to notice how you can release tension. What can you let go of? What can you feel a little more free in your body with? So in my transformation of my, I would say, I mean, it affected my speaking voice, but I was doing it more for my singing. I decided I had to go back to what you're talking about, these very basic elements. What is my breath? Because when we pay attention to our breath, we almost automatically change it all the time. It's very hard to catch ourselves in the act of breathing without modifying it. I've
Yes.
had some wonderful experiences waking up from sleep and being still in my sleep breath pattern at that time. And I go, wow, I didn't know that I breathe like that when I sleep.
Yeah.
And it was such a surprise. Now, what I was doing for months, working on my voice, was lying in bed and I love the idea of the exhale is where the voice is carried. Of course, there are some languages that have it on the in-breath, like my sister lives in Denmark, they go, that means yes. And we can speak like this for a
Yeah.
little bit, but we don't generally.
Right.
So what I had in my mind, okay, exhale, but for me, I knew I was holding my breath even as I was exhaling, like when I sang. So I like the idea of the sigh,
Yeah.
which I'm sure you use, and I just wanted to get to that very, very basic element of touching a bit of breath on my vocal cords and being able to feel that. Because you were talking about like how dancers, and I was a dancer, dancers, embody their instrument. But for me, dancing, I can see what's going on. I can see what someone else is doing and mirror it inside myself. It's so hard to do that with your voice because you can't see what's going on inside your throat. So I felt like the only way that I could get access is to begin to somatically, I don't know what the correct word is, kinesthetically, somatically, viscerally feel what's going on there as the air touches the vocal folds. And so I would just lie in bed going, and I would just do that for like 20 minutes. And after every time I did it, and I would only do one on a breath. So it took me a long time because I'd relax then, take the next breath, and then go, And what I noticed was that in between just doing that, my body had become a little tense.
Oh, interesting.
And so I made up this thing, okay, reset. And I'd like reset, and I do it again a few times. Every 3 or 4 little sounds, I would need to relax my body again. And I think this is what is so challenging, is that these muscle memories of tension are so embedded in us, aren't they?
Yeah.
And that's why something else you talk about in the book is patience.
Yes. I mean, I have so many, what you shared is so rich. I have a few thoughts. The first about how by placing attention on something, we impact it. Absolutely. And I think that, as I often say, our attention can do one of two things. It can either cause us to engage a muscle that's relaxed, which is what you're speaking about, or relax a muscle that's engaged. So I think that while we're working on attention, I think it's important to focus not on, or it can be very helpful, let me say it that way, to say, let me look for with my attention on what is tense so I can relax it by virtue of attending to it, rather than what we tend to do, which is, think of the breath and then the body goes, oh. So that can be helpful for some people to bring our attention to things that are tense, and then we are further relaxing. The other thing I think is important that I've learned with clients is to try to alter the relationship of attention. For me personally, everyone's different. My attender, my witness, is at the very top of an arena watching me sing and speak. And so over the years, I've learned through patience how to lovingly place her up there where she's highly aware and totally witnessing and observing and has all these opinions. but she just can't get to me down those stairs fast enough to impact my engagement. And that has given me this wonderful gift of being able. So, right now, for example, I'm talking to you and I'm witnessing myself talk, but I'm not affecting the physicality in any way because I've learned, and it's a skill, how to attend without impacting.
Mm.
That's, I think, that's something that I actively work on with my singers and speakers, because
Yes.
that way, you don't have to play the game of try not to think about it, try not to intellectualize it. You can have your cake and eat it too. You can really watch somatically. All of the terms you used, I use kinesthetically, I think are appropriate and accurate. You can watch and you can witness, even to the breathing, and not impact it.
You can allow it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Allow and witness.
Allow and witness, yes. With curiosity, with fascination, and pleasure.
Absolutely. And I love awe, wonder, all of those words, because they bring that creative playfulness, and they bring a non-attachment. They wonder, awe, reverence, curiosity, play. They cannot exist with ego, rightness, justification, all of which I find creates a physical crimp in the energy flow and causes muscles to engage that don't need to be engaged. So I think that's a really healthy cognitive and spiritual framework to bring to any creative endeavor, to any life endeavor.
Yeah. Yeah. So a lot of times when people speak, I like that you brought up the non-attachment. A lot of times we are attached. We're wanting to impress. We're wanting to be good. All these things
Mhm.
probably create some kind of tension. How do you release that? How do you let go of that need or desire to impress or release self-judgment?
Mhm.
How do you work with that?
Yeah. Well, and of course, my opinion is one opinion. As I always tell people, take what works from what I'm saying and use it if it works for you throughout everything else. And I preface this because I tend to be a little woo-woo, as my clients like to say. And so I really view, I think that the only, maybe not only, the best way to have pleasure and comfort in performance and speaking, singing, whatever, dancing, whatever it is that we have to actually move beyond wanting to impress and do a great job. And the only way that I know that reliably works is to knock down the divide between me and the audience. And frankly, the divide between me and you, between people. And simultaneously, to have a purpose, a cause, whether it's a purpose in each speech or song or an overarching thematic life purpose that's larger than my self-justification and my desire to impress. So,
Mhm.
for example, for me, my purpose, I don't feel nervous. I feel very connected with you. I'm here because my purpose, my desire, my heart's intent is to serve, to answer questions, to offer what I've learned with humility and joy and excitement to connect with you. And so there is no isolated me wanting to leap over a barrier to impress. So that's how I address that. And of course, that psychological piece helps because so much of our self-worth then comes into play. But I need to impress because if I don't impress, that means X. And you go down all of those rabbit holes.
Yes, yes. And um, to let others know a little bit of the behind the scenes before we started the live stream, you and I did 30 seconds of connecting with ourselves and and kind of stating the intention to be of service.
Yeah.
And yes, that does help. It's more important, I think, to feel like we are there. I mean, even if you're in a company like sharing financials, I mean, you're there to help other people understand something that you've taken the time to dive into and simplify it and give it context so that other people can understand it better. It's not about being good about presenting it. It's about being that you're playing a role that makes the whole enterprise work better.
Mhm.
And that is a kind of a service.
Yeah, and you know, language can get tricky and can trip people up. You know, I think, for example, in my work, some people don't love the word service. Some people have a very hard time with the word selfless because of their own stuff. A lot of people really get caught up, I think, with this idea of disappearing self as I can either, you know, feel empowered and entirely myself, or I have to let go of myself and my wants, and they're not mutually exclusive. I really think that whether in a corporation or anywhere in life, certainly in relationships, the desire to the willingness to be present and comfortable in every situation quiets the voice of am I okay, am I enough? When we attend, back to attending, when we attend to others and what do they need, what do they want, how can I reach them relationally, performatively, we can't do that and be worried about how we look at the same time. So therefore, just like the attention piece, let's empower ourselves and strengthen the muscle of attending out. And then because we're all the same, we end up with that wonderful mirror back to ourselves too. So again,
Mhm.
having our cake and eating it too. There are
Yeah.
all these through themes. that
Yeah.
we have
I do think that there is a little bit of a difference between performance
to-
as a artist
Mhm.
and performance as a um I don't know, as a speaker. I'm talking off the top of my head right
Mhm.
now. And
Mhm.
I think the difference is that, and I think maybe as a singer, you're kind of like halfway in between. But
Mhm.
there is that element when you are a performer as an artist of putting out your sense of artistry or a vision, and you're allowing others in to see it.
Mhm.
So, for instance, I was speaking a few weeks ago with a stuntman,
Mhm.
and there's no, so in performing, there's the fourth wall, um, of in if you're on stage in theater, you're interacting with the other characters, but you don't generally interact with the audience. But some people break that.
Yeah.
But so that's what I'm talking about. Like if you're dancing, you're not connecting with the audience. You're inside the piece. You're connecting with the other dancers
Mhm.
generally.
Mhm. Mhm.
And of obviously there, and so it's a little bit of a different intention, I believe.
Mhm.
That is kind of like, I've created this and I want to share it with you in the hopes that perhaps it will mean something to you. And I guess in that way, it could be the same. But I do feel like energetically, it feels different when
Mhm.
you're connecting with the audience directly and when you're simply like right now, I feel like we're doing a little bit of both. We're having a conversation. There are people here. Thank you so much for being here. And if you have a question, by the way, please ask. Um, but we're letting them listen in. So I
Mhm.
kind of feel like in art performance that it's a bit like that, or someone makes a piece of art, you put it on the wall. It's You're not thinking so much what is that person going to feel, but it's rather this is what I feel.
Hmm.
What do you think? Or here it is for you in case it resonates. What are your thoughts?
You know, I think that part of the beauty of human being is that we're all different and that we all have different perspectives. And I think that if you lined up every performer and stuntman and singer and dancer and creator and asked each one about their experience, they would all say, oh, well, this is how it occurs to me. This is how it occurs to me. And so for me, I think it's less about how it could or should occur to creators and more that whether it is, for example, to use what you said, if I've created something and am offering it, or I in my creation, you are the audience, are part of my generation and creation, Both are fine. The question I would ask is, do you feel alive and enlivened and comfortable and vulnerable in the positive sense? Do you feel inhibited in any way in that experience of expression? And if the answer is I don't feel at all inhibited, then perfect. So to me, it's more about the result of the experience rather than the experience. If someone feels
Yeah, I appreciate that. I appreciate that. I like that a lot. Thank you. Thank you for putting that. And I would say, yeah, I get that. And I think that ultimately is what's important, is how do we feel in the giving?
Yes, I mean, I'll give you an extreme example, and please interrupt me if I'm going on a tangent or something. But I've worked with some clients, in one case I'll just use in particular, a singer who had such stage fright, and we worked through that, but she had gotten so used to sort of a radical compartmentalization and almost dissociation, to get up on stage and sing and really allow herself to fully and freely be. She had to, and had practiced over the years, just kind of shutting down in order to liberate herself. So to me personally, I don't relate to that. That sounds uncomfortable, unreliable. What if that sort of facade, the scaffolding falls in the midst of a performance? What happens? But I learned to recognize that that's something that worked for her. And in that compartmentalization, she felt not only fully free, Linda, but she felt fully connected and able to connect with the audience. So we all have our own way. And to your point, what I look for is, do you feel free in the experience?
Yeah.
So I think that's
Yeah.
the most important thing.
Yeah. That kind of brings up something else you said in your book that kind of jumped out at me, and I wonder if you still feel the same way. You said, performance is a battle. Do you still look at it that way?
I'm trying to remember. Do you have the context? It sounds I'm trying to remember. It sounds like something.
Don't.
So no,
That's right. So no, you don't. Yeah, because I mean, I think it was like you have to. I don't know. Why don't I go back and find it, and we can have another conversation behind the scenes about it, because I was curious about it. Because I mean, I think this kind of relates to what you were just saying. I like to think of it not that we have to bring our armor with us, but that we can open ourselves to receive the energy of attention. And I think this is what I learned as a performer, is the idea that I can be fueled by people's attention.
Absolutely.
And that even like something as simple as taking in compliments from other people can help us with delighting in the limelight, because we are learning to receive energy from others. So what I like to do, and I teach in my Comfy on Camera class, is first we kind of connect with ourselves. We do a whole video just on connecting with ourselves, and then we relate to the lens, because people have, I don't know, made up relationships with the camera lens, and I want to bring it to a place of wonder. But then we start to play with the energy of receiving the people who are on the other side, and take it in and letting it fill our hearts, fill our cells and tissues, and especially because in this particular environment, people are receiving all these positive reflections. So it makes it more tangible, perhaps, and real, that, okay, it's just you wonderful people I know who are watching my videos. I'm taking in your positive regard. It teaches us to open our hearts and also to express our sense of gratitude for their attention, because attention is a gift, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah, I would be curious to find the battle piece, because I'm sitting here as you're speaking thinking, I don't know that it's ever occurred to me as a battle. So I wonder the context. I'd be curious about it.
Yeah. I will find it. I'll find it for you.
And then to your point about attention, I everything you said, I'm probably nodding, ridiculously, because I agree so emphatically with what you're saying. The one thing as you're speaking that's coming up for me is that I agree. I think being with the audience, communing with the audience, to me, when we are singing or speaking and communicating, it's not a one-way conversation. We are simultaneously, and it's important to develop the skill of being able to, like, for example, right now I'm talking, but I'm listening to you, I'm watching you, I'm taking you in. I feel that we are in which of course means we are in conversation right now as I am the one talking, because I'm with you, I'm reading you, I'm feeling you, I'm responding to you. And I think one thing to think about with that when we're training people that I've noticed can be kind of a bit of jarring sometimes is when we open ourselves to that receptivity, we have to recognize and we need to become comfortable with all reactions. And this is on stage and off the stage. For example, it's any of us can deal very well with fantastic reviews. Oh, you did a great job, you're wonderful. But are we equally able to allow in, process, and then healthily release constructive criticism or even just plain old
Trolling.
trolling? Right. And I think that's an important skill that has to do with confidence. And as we talked about a little while ago, what's our purpose in speaking? What's our mission? If it's to validate ourselves, then those things are going to hit. If it's to serve and to enjoy, then they'll feel differently.
Yeah.
But to bring that point home, I think that for those who are new to singing, speaking, performing of any kind, dancing, anything, to get comfortable with being present to all of the experience and to not personalize it, to have it all be information that we can use in communication that we can use to better and further our communication and our delivery or performance, whatever.
Yes. Yes. And I think that it's important to have ways of responding to those kinds of negativity around us that help us navigate it in a way that feels like it doesn't impact our sense of self-worth. Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely. And self-worth, we could do a whole show on self-worth. And that's the elephant in the room. Is our worth tied to not only our being a performer, a speaker, a whatever, a mother, a this, or that, or are we whole, perfect, and complete, and we enjoy and love and give our lives energy to these things? And I think in that distinction lies the whole landscape of whether we are comfortable in enjoying life and our expression, or whether we are beholden to having to do it right, perfectly, and to get only positive feedback.
Yeah. Yep. That's a whole other live stream. I want to get to Christine has a question.
Okay.
I've been told I'm a great dancer, but not a great singer. How can I translate my artistry and vulnerability to have a more resonant voice?
Mm. Do you want to tackle that, or should I?
Go for it.
Yeah. Well, there's so much in what she's saying. I've been told I'm a great dancer, but not a great singer. So that I just to pull it apart, I would first say, I would ask this woman, do you feel like you're a good singer? What are your beliefs about it? So that's where I would probably begin. There's that feedback piece, right? Does she think that she's a better dancer than singer? Before we go to the back half of her question, I'll just say that I work and have worked with a number of Broadway dancers who also sing. And one of the common themes, without exception, is I'm an extraordinary dancer. It's not often conscious, but we get to, do I have permission to also be an extraordinary singer? Is that arrogant? Is that too much to think I could be phenomenal at both? So I don't know with Christine what's going on, but maybe there might be some, can I be both? Can I be a great dancer? Can I be a great singer? Or maybe she agrees with people that she's not as good of a singer. So in terms of the piece about translating artistry and vulnerability, when she's using vulnerability, I hear permission. I think, is she, first of all, interested in being a great singer? Does she want to follow that? Is that something that's important to her? Then I would say pursue it and give yourself full permission to discover your voice, develop your voice, play with your voice. And to maybe pause on asking for or letting in feedback until that relationship with her voice is more solid, more comfortable, more intimate, more secure. Perhaps as it is with dancing, I'm not sure, but it sounds like dancing's a more secure relationship there. Those would be my first thoughts.
Yeah, I think that's lovely. I'll only add one very small thing to play with, which is to, when you sing at home, to dance as you sing,
Mm-hmm.
just as one thing to play with.
Yeah. And that also is the integration of the two, bringing them closer together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I have a couple of questions that were given to me to ask to you.
Okay.
One is someone who has, is it called dysphonia, vocal dysphonia?
Uh-huh.
How do you recommend working with that kind of tension in the voice? Is it overcomable?
It's a great question, and it seems to be something that's becoming more prevalent. There's a number of kinds of dysphonia. Basically, there's muscular tension dysphonia, where there's something structural that's going on. It can often be anxiety caused or exacerbated. But there's also neurological dysphonia, where something's going on that's causing a muscular reaction. The treatment largely depends on that. Just to be very clear, regardless of what it is, though, I'll say, and again, this is something we could do a whole podcast on, but one of the most important things, I think, I'll say two things actually. Many people who have dysphonia tend to favor their voices. So, for example, if we pull a muscle, or let's say sprain an ankle, do you know how we tend to favor it, which then ends up kind of exacerbating the problem? It's better to, of course, once we no longer have pain and once we know that we're healthy, to really act as if and walk as if everything's fine. So the muscles learn to remain on a healthy trajectory rather than start to compensate in ways that won't serve in the long term. With the voice, we tend to do that with people with dysphonia. We hear a sound that we don't like, our voices are doing things we don't like, and we go, oop, and then we sort of halt, we overthink. Like you said, that attention engages the breath in terms of holding. So that's, I think, one of the first things we can do, to speak as if we don't have this issue and see how that affects things. It not only affects the sound of our voice, it affects the relationship we have with the perception of our voice and ourselves as communicators. So implied in that too, Linda, is looking to see whether we have any wrong making around, I have this dysphonia thing. It is what it is. Like, I'm 5'5". If I walk through life going, it's wrong that I'm not 6 foot tall, or, 5'3", that's going to have an impact on me. So I would also just learn to accept and allow that this is what my voice is doing, and it's perfect. It might not be exactly what I want, but to begin with it being, it is what it is a really important step to mitigating or healing whatever might be going on. And then the other thing I would say, this is a bit unorthodox, but again, as always, try it on. If it works, great. If it doesn't, throw it out. People with dysphonia, because their voices are kind of slipping in a way, is the resulting sound, they tend to want to hold their breath and take very active high breaths. So, and now I'm going to talk in a way to kind of try to help control what the vocal folds and the larynx does. And as counterintuitive as it might sound, I encourage clients who have this issue to relax the breath and allow the breath, to not overbreathe. Because what that does is, when we overbreathe, we're incorrectly pressurizing that subglottal pressure, which makes it even harder for the folds to figure out what to do. So again, we could go on and on about this, but relax your breathing. If not, embrace that you've got this issue, accept and allow it. And try not to favor it with your breath or with your engagement, speaking, and musculature.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Lovely. Thank you. I hope that will be helpful. A similar question I got, and I get all the time,
Mhm.
is people who, especially women, I find, but men do this too, they're looking, especially when they're in a company or work setting, they want to lower their voice and they find themselves going into fry like this. Or
Yes.
at the end of sentences, they're going down into fry.
Yeah.
Maybe there are other descriptor words for that, but what do you recommend?
Mhm.
Because I know personally, you can be in fry up here too. It's not just about raising your pitch.
Yeah, exactly. Well, again, your questions are so rich. I feel like to answer them comprehensively, would be another wonderful conversation. So apologies in advance. I'll just touch on some overarching themes about it. The big one, of course, is why do we want to lower our voice? What is it we perceive? Are we trying to meet um, a true ask in the environment? Let me give you an example. I love analogies and metaphors. So sometimes when I go into a professional setting, I have, because of my ethnic background, really curly, big, wild hair, which I love. And oftentimes in certain settings, I know that in order to facilitate my goal, which is their being able to really listen and hear what I'm saying, that my hair can be a distraction. So I'll pull it back, right? I do that not because I feel there's something wrong with my hair or me, but in service out of a desire to really empower them to get what I'm offering. So to come back to your specific question, I would say I also hear people say, I want to lower my voice because my voice is too high. And I start like with Christine. Well, is that feedback? Is that something you believe or is that feedback you've been given? I would start with, why do you want to lower your voice? And I would work with that person to see, is that something you really need to do? Is that a self-perception or is that a true ask from the culture, either in an unhealthy way because there's some prejudice around often women with higher voices and what that means? Or is it because you, out of your own self-expression, really want to make sure that people hear and that lowering the tone would be healthy? So that's that one piece. To the fry point, I would encourage people to, in music, we have what are called phrases, which for those of you who aren't musical on the written page look like a rainbow. They begin at point A and the phrase extends up and then comes down. And in our speaking, we tend to do that too unconsciously. We begin a sentence and then as we get to the end, we kind of fall off. And at the fall off point is where the fry or the vocal folds rubbing together rather than vibrating and not touching, they kind of come together and do that. So I would encourage your listeners to think of speaking phrases not as a melodic rainbow line, but I look at it like a light switch. When we begin to speak, the light switch goes on and we talk all the way through to the end of the line. And as soon as we're done, it goes off. So instead of sort of descending at the end of our thought in pitch and energy, we begin talking and we talk, and it's just almost like we're shooting through the goal. And then once we're done, the energy comes off. That usually helps vocal fry at any pitch register.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, I think we need to close up shop for today. This is so much fun, and we'll do more. What would you like to leave people with about their voices?
Well, coming back full circle to my woo-woo-ness, I think that my work, my passion is to encourage people to first embrace their voices and by extension themselves. Whatever's going on with your voice, whatever you're feeling about the sound of your voice, many people, Linda, I'm sure you know, come to us saying, I don't like the sound of my voice. I heard myself on tape. I don't like it. Look at that. Our voices are an extension of who we are, and therefore, by extension, they're an extension of how we feel about ourselves. Learn to listen to your voice, to allow your voice, to get curious about your voice, to play with your voice, and to eventually embrace your voice, to relax into it. And lastly, we don't die at night because our bodies breathe for us. We don't have to overthink speaking because our fantastic instruments do it for us. So before you develop your voice, I would say really look at, trust, acknowledge, and honor the wisdom of your instrument. Spend more time there before you begin to pick up the mantle of training, working, fixing, correcting, augmenting.
Well, thank you so much, Jennifer. I really have loved this conversation.
Me too.
Anyone who's been watching, if you have any questions, put them in the comments. We'll come back and check it out. If you particularly liked something, let us know that too. That's really helpful. My feeling is that speaking is our human design. If there's somewhere we don't feel comfortable, let's figure that out why and learn to delight in the limelight together. So please come on to next show. I don't have right in front of me who we have on next week, but you can also head over to the Delight in the Limelight podcast, where I have a Cliff Notes version of my book talking about how to reveal and heal the negative influences that you may have had that made you feel unsafe to speak. So until next time, wishing you all delight in the limelight.